Every moment you spend around other people, an invisible game is being played. It does not announce itself. It has no formal rules written on paper. Yet it governs how people speak to you, how seriously they take you, how much influence you hold, and how easily others can shape your decisions. This game operates beneath words, beneath conscious intention, and often beneath awareness itself. Most people move through life unaware that this game exists, believing their interactions are driven purely by logic, personality, or chance. In reality, human behavior follows patterns as old as our species, shaped by survival instincts, emotional conditioning, and social hierarchy. Human psychology is not random. It is adaptive. Every reaction, hesitation, attraction, and resistance serves a function, even when it appears irrational on the surface. The mind evolved not to make you happy, but to keep you alive and socially accepted. Understanding this single truth changes how you see every interaction. You stop taking behavior personally and start seeing it strategically. You stop reacting blindly and start observing patterns. Social intelligence begins where illusion ends. The illusion is that people say what they mean, act according to their stated values, and make decisions based on reason. Sometimes they do. Often, they do not. More frequently, people act according to how they feel in the moment, what they fear losing, what they desire gaining, and how they believe they are being perceived. Words are only the surface layer. The real drivers operate underneath. From the moment people encounter each other, their nervous systems begin exchanging information. Who is confident? Who is uncertain? Who leads? Who adapts? These assessments happen in seconds without deliberate thought. Facial expressions, posture, eye contact, vocal tone, and timing all send signals. These signals shape the direction of the interaction before a single argument or idea is fully formed. This is why some people command respect without effort, while others struggle to be heard even when they are competent and intelligent. Power in human interaction is rarely about force. It is about perception. Whoever is perceived as calm, grounded, and internally stable tends to exert influence. Anxiety weakens authority. Neediness erodes credibility. Over-explaining signals insecurity. The mind is constantly scanning for cues of strength and safety because, throughout history, aligning with the right people increased chances of survival. This instinct still operates today, even in modern civilized settings. The invisible game is not about manipulation in the crude sense. It is about understanding reality. Gravity does not become immoral because you understand how it works. Psychology does not become unethical because you learn its mechanics. What matters is intention. Mastery allows you to protect yourself from being unconsciously controlled while giving you the ability to guide. Interactions deliberately rather than reactively. One of the most important principles of human psychology is this: people respond more to how you make them feel than to what you say. Logic may justify decisions after the fact, but emotion drives them in the moment. This is why a confident but incorrect person can dominate a conversation over a hesitant expert. The emotional signal overrides informational accuracy. Social intelligence means recognizing this and learning to communicate in a way that aligns emotion with intention. Another hidden force governing behavior is the need for certainty. Humans are deeply uncomfortable with ambiguity. When people feel uncertain, they seek anchors, strong opinions, confident leaders, clear narratives. This is why confident communication often persuades more effectively than careful nuance. It reduces psychological discomfort. Understanding this does not mean abandoning truth. It means learning how to present truth in a way that feels stable rather than threatening. Status is another invisible driver. Status is not just wealth or title. It is perceived value in a given context. A person with high status in one environment may have low status in another. Humans instinctively adjust their behavior based on these perceived hierarchies. They listen more closely to high-status individuals, interrupt low-status ones more freely, and assign competence based on social signals rather than evidence. This happens automatically, even when people consciously believe in equality. Social intelligence requires you to see how status is communicated subtly. Who speaks first? Who interrupts? Who apologizes? Who holds eye contact? Who fills silence? And who lets it linger? These behaviors create an unspoken structure that shapes the interaction. When you understand this structure, you can choose how you participate in it, rather than being unconsciously placed within it. Another core force is emotional regulation. People who cannot regulate their emotions are easily influenced. Anger narrows perception. Fear accelerates compliance. Desire clouds judgment. Calmness, on the other hand, creates leverage. When you remain composed while others react emotionally, you gain psychological advantage without confrontation. This is not about suppressing emotion, but about not being controlled by it. The invisible game also operates through mirroring. Humans naturally mirror the behavior, tone, and emotional state of those around them. This builds rapport and trust, but it can also spread anxiety or aggression. A socially intelligent person is aware of this dynamic and uses it intentionally. By maintaining a steady, confident presence, you invite others to adjust to you rather than the other way around. Silence is one of the most misunderstood tools in human interaction. Many people fear silence because it feels like loss of control. In reality, silence often creates control. When you are comfortable not speaking, others feel pressure to fill the gap. They reveal information, justify themselves, or soften their position. Silence shifts the psychological burden onto the other person. Used calmly, it is one of the most powerful signals of confidence. Framing is another invisible force. People do not respond to events. They respond to interpretations. The same situation can feel like a threat or an opportunity, depending on how it is framed. Whoever controls the frame controls the emotional response. This is why skilled communicators focus less on arguing facts and more on shaping context. They understand that perception precedes persuasion. Humans are also deeply influenced by consistency. Once people commit to an idea, identity, or position, they feel internal pressure to remain consistent with it. This is why labels are powerful. When someone identifies as competent, strong, or ethical, they will unconsciously act to protect that self-image. Social intelligence involves recognizing how identity drives behavior and how to speak to that identity rather than against it. The invisible game becomes especially clear in moments of tension. Conflict reveals hierarchy, emotional control, and psychological leverage. People who escalate quickly reveal insecurity. People who remain composed gain authority. In these moments, the outcome is often decided not by who is right, but by who stays centered. Emotional discipline becomes social power. Another hidden force is validation. Humans crave recognition and approval, even when they deny it. This desire shapes behavior more than most people realize. Compliments, attention, and acknowledgement act as psychological currency. Those who distribute validation strategically often gain influence. Those who seek it excessively give influence away. Mastery lies in balance, being neither starved for validation nor dismissive of it. Fear of social rejection is one of the strongest motivators in human behavior. People will compromise values, suppress opinions, and follow group norms to avoid exclusion. This instinct is ancient. In early human history, exclusion often meant death. Today, the fear remains, even if the consequences are symbolic rather than physical. Understanding this explains why people conform even when they know better. Social intelligence does not mean exploiting fear. It means recognizing when it is present and not allowing it to control you. The moment you stop being governed by fear of judgment, your behavior changes. Your communication becomes clearer. Your boundaries strengthen. Others sense this shift immediately, often responding with increased respect. The invisible game also operates internally. Your own thoughts, reactions, and impulses are shaped by conditioning you may not be aware of. Before you can consistently influence others, you must understand how influence operates within you. What triggers defensiveness? What makes you seek approval? What causes you to withdraw or overcompensate? Self-awareness is the foundation of all social mastery. Confidence, contrary to popular belief, does not come from certainty. It comes from tolerance for uncertainty. People who need to be right feel threatened by disagreement. People who are secure can allow uncertainty without losing composure. This flexibility is perceived as strength. The invisible game rewards adaptability over rigidity. As you begin to see these forces at work, interactions that once felt confusing start to make sense. You'll notice why certain conversations drain you and others energize you. You see why some people dominate rooms effortlessly while others struggle despite good intentions? This awareness can feel unsettling at first because it reveals how little of human behavior is purely spontaneous. To master human psychology and social intelligence. Rationality exists, but it is not the engine. It is the narrator. The real drivers of human behavior are emotion, instinct, and conditioning. Operating long before conscious thought enters the scene, the mind explains decisions after they are made, often convincingly, but rarely honestly. When you understand this, you stop arguing with explanations and start working with causes. The human brain evolved under pressure. For tens of thousands of years, survival depended on rapid judgment, not careful analysis. Friend or threat, safe or dangerous, dominant or submissive. These snap assessments were not flaws. They were advantages. Modern life may be more complex, but the brain has not fundamentally changed. It still relies on shortcuts, emotional cues, and pattern recognition. These shortcuts shape decisions and conversations, negotiations, relationships, and conflicts every day. At the center of this system is emotion. Emotion is not the opposite of intelligence. It is the foundation of it. Emotions prioritize information. They tell the mind what matters and what can be ignored. Fear sharpens focus. Desire narrows attention. Anger mobilizes energy. Calmness broadens perception. Every emotion alters how information is processed. When you understand this, you realize that influencing decisions is less about presenting better arguments and more about shaping emotional context. Thoughts are often mistaken for causes. When they are usually effects, a person feels uneasy, then thinks something must be wrong. A person feels confident, then thinks they are capable. The feeling comes first. The thought follows. This sequence matters because it means you cannot reliably change behavior by addressing thoughts alone. If the emotional state remains unchanged, the mind will simply generate new thoughts to justify the same behavior. Instinct operates even deeper than emotion. Instinct is the body's ancient intelligence, concerned with survival, status, belonging, and reproduction. Much of social behavior is driven by instinctive calculations. Am I safe here? Do I belong? Am I respected? Am I at risk of humiliation or exclusion? These questions are rarely asked consciously, but they are constantly answered through bodily sensations and emotional reactions. Social intelligence begins when you learn to read these underlying processes in yourself and others. You start noticing when someone's resistance is not intellectual, but emotional. You sense when agreement is superficial and driven by avoidance rather than alignment. You recognize when confidence is genuine and when it is compensatory. These distinctions are subtle, but they are decisive. One of the most important mechanisms in the human mind is threat detection. The brain is biased toward noticing potential threats more than potential rewards. This negativity bias kept our ancestors alive. But it also makes modern humans overly sensitive to criticism, rejection, and uncertainty. A single negative interaction can outweigh several positive ones. This is why people remember insults more vividly than compliments, and failures more intensely than successes. Understanding threat detection explains why people become defensive, even when no attack is intended. A question can feel like a challenge. Feedback can feel like rejection. Silence can feel like disapproval. When the brain perceives threat, even inaccurately, it shifts into protection mode. Logical reasoning diminishes, emotional reactions intensify, and the goal becomes self-preservation rather than understanding. If you try to influence someone who feels threatened, you will fail more often than not. The mind cannot be persuaded while it is defending itself. Social intelligence requires you to reduce perceived threat before attempting to guide behavior. This can be done through tone, pacing, validation, and presence. Often what people need first is not agreement, but safety. Another central driver of behavior is reward anticipation. The brain is constantly predicting outcomes and releasing motivation chemicals like dopamine based on expected reward. This anticipation shapes attention and effort. People move toward what they believe will bring relief, pleasure, status, or meaning. They move away from what they associate with pain, shame, or loss. These associations are not always accurate, but they are powerful. Language plays a critical role in shaping these associations. Words are not neutral. They carry emotional weight based on past experiences. For one person, the word challenge may feel exciting. For another, it may feel threatening. Social intelligence involves listening not just to what people say, but to how they respond emotionally to certain words and ideas. This tells you how their internal map is structured. The mind also relies heavily on heuristics, or mental shortcuts. These shortcuts simplify decision-making, but introduce predictable biases. Authority bias causes people to trust perceived experts. Familiarity bias makes repeated ideas feel more true. Scarcity bias increases desire when something seems limited. Consistency bias makes people defend positions they have already taken. These biases are not signs of stupidity. They are features of human cognition. When you understand these biases, you begin to see why people act against their own stated interests. You see why someone defends a bad decision simply because they made it. You see why confident delivery often matters more than content. You see why first impressions are so powerful. This awareness allows you to respond strategically rather than emotionally. Another often overlooked force is identity. People do not just make decisions. They protect identities. If a belief is tied to someone's sense of self, challenging that belief feels like a personal attack. This is why debates rarely change minds. When identity is threatened, the mind prioritizes defense over truth. Social intelligence means knowing when to engage and when to disengage, to influence effectively. You must learn to speak to identity rather than against it. Instead of saying, "You are wrong," you signal, "This aligns with who you already believe yourself to be." When people feel their identity is affirmed, they become more open. When it feels threatened, they close off. This is not manipulation. It is psychological reality. Emotional memory also plays a significant role in behavior. The brain remembers how experiences felt more than what objectively happened. Two people can experience the same event and walk away with completely different emotional memories. These memories shape future expectations and reactions. When someone reacts strongly to a seemingly minor situation, they're often responding to an old emotional pattern being reactivated. This is why patience and curiosity are powerful tools. When you see disproportionate reactions, you stop taking them personally and start looking for the underlying trigger. This shift alone can prevent unnecessary conflict and give you insight into how to navigate the way interaction more effectively. The mind is also deeply influenced by social proof. People look to others to determine appropriate behavior, especially in uncertain situations. This is why trends spread, norms persist, and group behavior can override individual judgment. Social intelligence involves understanding when people are acting from personal conviction and when they are simply following perceived consensus. Internal dialogue is another layer of control. The way people speak to themselves shapes their confidence, risk tolerance, and resilience. Many individuals are unconsciously governed by harsh inner critics or fear-based narratives. These internal voices influence external behavior. When you recognize this, you become less reactive to surface-level behavior and more attuned to internal struggle. Self-control then becomes central. If you are ruled by your own unexamined emotions and instincts, you will be easily influenced by others who can trigger them. Mastery begins internally. When you can notice your emotional responses without immediately acting on them, you create a gap. In that gap lies choice. Choice is power. This does not mean suppressing emotion. Suppression leads to leakage, passive aggression, and loss of authenticity. Mastery means awareness and regulation. You feel the emotion, but you decide how to respond. This capacity alone dramatically increases social effectiveness. Because others sense stability and clarity, the human mind also seeks coherence. It wants the world to make sense, even when it does not. When faced with uncertainty, people construct narratives to restore order. These narratives can be inaccurate, but they provide psychological comfort. Understanding this explains why people cling to beliefs even in the face of contradictory evidence. Letting go of a narrative can feel like stepping into chaos. Social intelligence respects this need for coherence. Rather than tearing down narratives abruptly, it gently reshapes them. Influence that lasts does not humiliate. It reorients. It allows people to arrive at new conclusions while preserving dignity as you decode the human mind. You begin to see behavior as communication rather than opposition. Resistance communicates fear. Aggression communicates insecurity. Withdrawal communicates overwhelm. Compliance may communicate safety or avoidance. When you read behavior this way, your responses become more precise and less reactive. This chapter is not about turning people into predictable machines. Humans are complex and layered, but complexity does not mean randomness. Patterns exist, and patterns can be understood. When you understand the relationship between thoughts, emotions, and instincts, you stop being surprised by behavior. You start anticipating it. Human beings speak long before they use words. Long before logic is formed, long before sentences are constructed, the body has already communicated intent, emotion, and position. This silent language operates continuously, often unconsciously, shaping how people perceive one another and how interactions unfold. To master social intelligence, you must learn to read this language fluently, not as a collection of tricks, but as a living system that reveals what words often conceal. Most people believe they are good at reading. Others because they listen to what is said. In reality, words are the least reliable channel of communication when emotions are involved. People lie, soften, exaggerate, omit, and rationalize through language. The body, however, is far more honest. It reacts faster than conscious thought. It leaks information before the mind can edit it. When there is a mismatch between words and body language, the body is almost always telling the truth. Reading people instantly does not mean making rigid judgments based on single gestures. That is a common mistake. Human behavior must be read in clusters and context. A crossed arm alone means nothing. A crossed arm paired with tension in the jaw, reduced eye contact, and a shift away from you tells a story. Social intelligence is pattern recognition, not superstition. The first thing to understand is baseline behavior. Every person has a natural resting state, how they normally sit, speak, gesture, and move when relaxed. Without understanding someone's baseline, deviations are meaningless. A person who avoids eye contact may simply be introverted. The same behavior from someone who was previously engaged and open may signal discomfort or withdrawal. Always look for change rather than isolated signals. The body responds to comfort and discomfort immediately. When people feel safe, they open up physically. Their posture expands. Movements become fluid. Breathing slows. When they feel threatened or uncertain, the body contracts. Shoulders tighten. Movements become restricted. Feet angle away. These responses are not chosen. They are automatic. They are governed by the nervous system, not conscious intent. One of the most revealing indicators of internal state is tension. Tension appears in the jaw, neck, shoulders, hands, and voice. A clenched jaw often signals suppressed anger or stress. Tight shoulders suggest emotional burden or defensiveness. Fidgeting hands may indicate anxiety or impatience. None of these signals mean the same thing in every situation, but they always mean something is being managed internally. Microexpressions are another powerful window into the mind. These are fleeting facial expressions that last fractions of a second, often appearing before a person consciously masks them. Surprise flashes across the eyes. Disgust briefly curls the lip. Fear widens the eyes. These expressions are universal because they are rooted in biology. They cannot be fully controlled. It's only suppressed after they occur. The key to noticing micro-expressions is not staring intensely at someone's face. That creates tension and distorts behavior. Instead, soften your focus. Let your awareness expand. The more relaxed you are, the more you will notice. Anxiety narrows perception. Calmness widens it. Social intelligence begins with your own nervous system regulation. Eye behavior offers rich information, but it is often misunderstood. Eye contact does not automatically mean honesty, nor does avoidance mean deception. Context matters. Sustained eye contact combined with a rigid posture may signal dominance or challenge. Frequent blinking can indicate stress. Rapid shifts in gaze may signal internal conflict. When eyes suddenly freeze, it often means heightened attention or threat detection. Pupil dilation is another subtle indicator. Pupils dilate in response to interest, attraction, or heightened emotional arousal. They constrict under stress or disapproval. While this signal is subtle and lighting dependent, when noticed in context, it can reveal engagement or aversion. Before words confirm it, the feet are one of the most honest parts of the body. They often point toward what a person wants and away from what they do not. When someone's feet angle toward an exit, they may be disengaging mentally even if they remain verbally polite. When feet orient toward you while the torso remains guarded, interest may be present beneath caution. Posture communicates status and internal certainty. An upright, relaxed posture signals confidence. A collapsed posture often signals submission, exhaustion, or low perceived status. Overly rigid posture can signal insecurity masked as control. The body reveals not just emotion, but self-perception. Gestures also matter. Open gestures with palms visible often signal openness and trust. Hidden hands can signal caution or discomfort. Excessive gesturing may indicate anxiety or a need to convince. Minimal gestures paired with stillness often signal confidence or control. Again, context is everything. Culture, personality, and environment shape expression. Vocal cues are part of body language as well. Tone, pace, volume, and rhythm carry more meaning than words alone. A steady voice signals control. A rising pitch often signals uncertainty or appeasement. Speaking too quickly may signal nervousness. Speaking too slowly may signal authority or detachment. Pauses are especially revealing. People pause when thinking, but also when managing emotion. One of the most important tells is incongruence. When the body and words do not align, pay attention. Someone says they are fine, but their shoulders are tense and their breathing shallow. Someone claims confidence, but avoids stillness and fills silence compulsively. Incongruence does not automatically mean deception. It often means internal conflict. But internal conflict always matters. Mirroring is another powerful indicator. Humans naturally mirror those they feel rapport with. They adopt similar postures, gestures, and rhythms. When mirroring increases, connection is usually strengthening. When mirroring breaks suddenly, something has shifted. Interest may have dropped. Discomfort may have arisen. Awareness of this shift allows you to adjust in real time. Proximity is also revealing. People regulate distance based on comfort, status, and intention. Moving closer can signal trust or dominance depending on context. Increasing distance can signal discomfort or disengagement. Notice when someone subtly leans in or away during conversation. These movements are rarely accidental. Facial tension deserves special attention. The muscles around the eyes, mouth, and forehead reveal emotional effort. Forced smiles lack eye engagement. Genuine smiles engage the entire face. A tight mouth often signals restraint. A slack expression may signal disengagement. The face is constantly negotiating between expression and suppression. Another important tell is response latency. How quickly someone responds after you speak matters. Immediate responses may signal eagerness or defensiveness. Delayed responses may signal thoughtfulness, uncertainty, or emotional processing. Sudden changes in response timing often indicate internal shifts, Hands reveal a great deal. Trembling hands signal anxiety. Steepled fingers often signal confidence or evaluation. Clenched fists suggest anger or determination. Touching the face, neck, or throat often signals self-soothing under stress. These behaviors are not conscious strategies. They are regulatory mechanisms. Breathing patterns are also informative. Shallow breathing often accompanies stress or fear. Deep, slow breathing signals calm or control. When you notice someone's breathing change during a conversation, something meaningful has occurred internally. Reading people effectively also requires humility. You are not mind-reading. You are interpreting signals probabilistically. The goal is not certainty, but awareness. Social intelligence improves your odds of understanding, not your claim to infallibility. When you hold this mindset, your observations remain flexible rather than rigid. Another essential skill is observing yourself. Your own body language affects others constantly. If you want to read accurately, you must also regulate your own signals. Tension in you creates tension in others. Calm in you invites openness. The observer is part of the system. Context cannot be overstated. Cultural norms shape expression. Power dynamics shape behavior. Stress levels alter baseline. A person in a high-stakes environment will display different signals than the same person at ease. Always ask internally, what pressures might be acting on this person right now? Social intelligence is not about catching people in lies. It is about understanding emotional truth. Someone may speak truthfully, while emotionally conflicted. Someone may lie calmly out of fear. Body language reveals emotional state more reliably than factual accuracy. This distinction matters. As you become more skilled at reading people, you will notice shifts earlier. You will sense resistance before it becomes explicit. You will notice interest before it is verbalized. This early awareness allows you to adjust your approach, clarify misunderstandings, or disengage strategically. Reading people also protects you. It helps you notice manipulation, concealed hostility, or false compliance. It alerts you when someone is uncomfortable but unwilling to speak. It helps you avoid pushing when pressure would backfire. Awareness creates choice. Importantly, this skill must be paired with ethics. Reading people gives you information. What you do with that information defines your character. Mastery means using insight to create clarity, alignment, and respect, not exploitation. Influence without integrity collapses eventually. Emotional intelligence is often misunderstood as kindness, empathy, or being agreeable. While those qualities can be expressions of it, emotional intelligence is something far more foundational. It is the ability to recognize emotional states in yourself and others, understand how those states influence behavior, and regulate responses in a way that serves long-term outcomes rather than short-term impulses. In human interaction, this ability is power, quiet power, stable power, the kind of power that does not need to dominate because it already governs the emotional terrain in which decisions are made. Every interaction unfolds on two levels simultaneously. There is the visible exchange of words, and there is the invisible exchange of emotional signals. Most people focus almost exclusively on the first level. They choose words carefully, craft arguments, and try to sound reasonable. Meanwhile, the second level determines whether any of it lands. If the emotional field is tense, defensive, or insecure, even the best argument will fail. If the emotional field is calm, open, and grounded, influence happens with far less effort. Emotional intelligence begins with self-awareness. Before you can regulate an interaction, you must recognize what is happening inside you. This sounds simple, but it is not. Many people are emotionally reactive without realizing it. They believe they are responding to the situation, when they are actually responding to an internal trigger activated by the situation. A tone of voice triggers defensiveness. A pause triggers anxiety. A disagreement triggers a need to be right. Without awareness, these reactions run the interaction. When you develop emotional awareness, you begin to notice the early signals: a tightening in the chest, a quickening of the breath, a surge of irritation. These sensations appear before words and actions. They are the body's way of saying something matters. Emotional intelligence does not eliminate these signals. It listens to them without obeying them blindly. This pause between feeling and action is where power is born. Regulation is not suppression. Suppression pushes emotion underground where it leaks out in passive aggression. Sarcasm, withdrawal, or sudden explosions. Regulation means allowing the emotion to exist without letting it dictate behavior. You feel anger, but you choose clarity. You feel fear, but you choose presence. You feel excitement, but you choose restraint. This choice is subtle, but it radically alters how others experience you. People trust those who can regulate themselves. Trust does not come from perfection. It comes from stability. When others sense that your emotions do not swing wildly, that you are not easily provoked or destabilized, they relax. Their nervous systems downshift. Conversations slow. Resistance softens. This is not charisma in the dramatic sense. It is emotional gravity. One of the most powerful aspects of emotional intelligence is the ability to tolerate discomfort. Many people try to resolve emotional tension as quickly as possible. They rush to reassure, explain, apologize, or agree. Not because it is necessary, but because they cannot tolerate the feeling of tension. This urgency gives control away. Whoever needs the tension to end first loses leverage. When you can sit calmly in emotional discomfort, you change the dynamic. Silence no longer threatens you. Disagreement no longer destabilizes you. Strong emotions in others no longer hijack your behavior. This steadiness communicates confidence at a deep, nonverbal level. Others may not be able to articulate why they feel differently around you, but they will. Emotional intelligence also involves reading emotional states accurately. Many conflicts escalate because emotions are misread. Frustration is mistaken for hostility. Silence is mistaken for rejection. Caution is mistaken for disinterest. When you learn to distinguish emotional signals, you respond more precisely. Precision reduces friction. Empathy plays a role here, but not in the sentimental sense. Empathy is the ability to understand another person's emotional experience without becoming absorbed by it. You can recognize someone's fear without sharing it. You can acknowledge someone's anger without reacting defensively. This creates connection without loss of control. One of the most underestimated skills in social intelligence is validation. Validation does not mean agreement. It means acknowledging emotional reality. When you validate someone's experience, you reduce their need to defend it. The human nervous system relaxes when it feels seen. Once that happens, the mind becomes more flexible. Influence becomes possible. Many people avoid validation because they fear it will weaken their position. In reality, refusing to validate often hardens resistance. When people feel emotionally dismissed, they cling more tightly to their stance. Validation disarms without conceding. It says, "I see you, not you are right." This distinction is crucial. Emotional intelligence also reveals how easily emotions spread. Emotions are contagious. Anxiety transfers. Calm transfers. Anger transfers. Confidence transfers. In group settings, emotional tone often matters more than content. One regulated individual can stabilize a room. One reactive individual can destabilize it. When you understand this, you realize that managing your own emotional state is not just personal. It is strategic. This is why leaders, negotiators, and influential figures often appear calm under pressure. It is not that they feel less. It is that they regulate more. Their calm becomes a reference point. Others unconsciously align with it. Emotional intelligence creates leadership without force. Another critical aspect is recognizing emotional leverage points. People are more open after they feel understood. They are more defensive when they feel judged. They are more compliant when they feel safe. They are more creative when they feel relaxed. Timing matters. Trying to persuade someone while they are emotionally activated is usually ineffective. Waiting until the emotional intensity has passed often changes everything. Emotional intelligence also helps you recognize when not to engage. Not every emotional expression requires a response. Some are bids for attention. Some are attempts to provoke. Some are releases that pass quickly if not amplified. Knowing when to stay silent and present is as important as knowing when to speak. Another layer of mastery is understanding your emotional patterns. Everyone has predictable triggers. Certain tones, personalities, or situations activate you more than others. These triggers are not weaknesses. They are information. When you identify them, you gain the ability to prepare. Preparedness prevents reactivity. Many people confuse emotional intelligence with being emotionally expressive. In truth, emotional intelligence is about choice. Sometimes expression is appropriate. Sometimes restraint is wiser. The skill lies in knowing the difference. Expressing everything you feel may feel authentic, but it often burdens others and weakens influence. Suppressing everything you feel creates distance and inauthenticity. Balance is mastery. Emotional intelligence also reshapes how you interpret others' behavior. Instead of assuming malicious intent, you begin to see emotional drivers. Defensiveness signals fear. Arrogance signals insecurity. Withdrawal signals overwhelm. This perspective reduces personal offense and increases strategic clarity. You stop reacting to the surface and start addressing the source. This shift alone changes relationships. Conflicts become less dramatic. Boundaries become clearer. Communication becomes cleaner. You are no longer pulled into emotional chaos that does not belong to you. This emotional independence is deeply attractive and deeply powerful. Another important component is emotional pacing. Conversations have rhythms. Pushing too quickly creates resistance. Moving too slowly creates disengagement. Emotional intelligence involves sensing the pace of the interaction and adjusting accordingly. This sensitivity cannot be faked. It comes from presence. Presence itself is a form of influence. When you are fully present, people feel it. Your attention is not scattered. Your responses are not delayed by internal noise. This quality makes others feel significant. Feeling significant increases openness. Openness increases influence. Emotional intelligence also protects you from manipulation. Manipulation relies on triggering emotional reactions: fear, guilt, urgency, flattery. When you can recognize these triggers as they arise, their power diminishes. You still feel the emotion, but you are no longer compelled by it. This creates psychological immunity. It is important to note that emotional intelligence does not make you emotionless. It makes you emotionally fluent. You feel deeply, but you are not ruled by feeling. You care, but you do not cling. You assert, but you do not attack. This balance is rare, and because it is rare, it stands out. As you develop this skill, you may notice that some people respond with increased respect, while others feel unsettled. Those who rely on emotional chaos to gain control may find you difficult to manipulate. This is not a flaw. It is a sign of progress. Emotional intelligence also deepens self-respect. When you act in alignment with your values rather than your impulses, you trust yourself more. This internal trust becomes external confidence. Others sense it. Confidence rooted in self-trust is stable. It does not collapse under criticism or praise. The final layer of emotional intelligence is integration. You do not reject emotion. You integrate it into decision-making without surrendering to it. Emotion provides data. Reason provides structure. Instinct provides energy. When these elements work together, behavior becomes both effective and authentic. Language is not merely a tool for expressing thought. It is a mechanism for shaping reality. The words people choose, the tone they use, the order in which ideas are presented, and the emotional weight behind their speech all influence how others perceive, feel, and decide. Most people believe communication is about transmitting information. In truth, it is about guiding interpretation. Whoever understands this controls far more than conversations. They shape outcomes. Every word carries more than a definition. It carries emotional residue from past experiences, cultural conditioning, and personal associations. Two people can hear the same sentence and feel entirely different things. One feels motivated, the other feels threatened. One feels respected, the other feels diminished. Social intelligence requires you to understand that communication is never neutral. Language always pushes emotion in one direction or another. Tone is often more influential than content. A calm statement delivered with certainty can feel authoritative, even if the idea is simple. The same statement delivered with hesitation can feel weak or uncertain, even if the idea is strong. Humans evolved to retone before language. Tone tells the nervous system whether to relax or prepare for threat. When tone and words conflict, tone almost always wins. This is why people say they trust someone's gut feeling more than their words. The gut is responding to tone, rhythm, and emotional congruence. A socially intelligent person learns to align tone with intention, not by acting, but by regulating internal state. Calm tone comes from calm presence. Controlled tone comes from emotional regulation, not vocal tricks. Framing is one of the most powerful linguistic tools available. The same idea can be framed as a gain or a loss, a choice or an obligation, a risk or an opportunity. Humans are far more motivated to avoid loss than to pursue gain. This loss aversion is deeply wired. When something is framed as something to be lost, attention sharpens and urgency increases. However, excessive pressure backfires. When people feel cornered, autonomy is threatened and resistance increases. Effective framing balances urgency with agency. It makes action feel chosen rather than forced. This is why questions are often more powerful than commands. A question invites participation. A command invites resistance unless status is already established. The order in which information is presented also matters. First impressions anchor perception. The first frame introduced often becomes the reference point against which everything else is evaluated. If you define the context early, you guide interpretation downstream. If you allow others to define it first, you are already responding rather than leading. Language also signals status. Certain speech patterns unconsciously communicate authority, while others communicate deference. Over-explaining signals, insecurity, excessive qualifiers weaken impact. Apologizing unnecessarily lowers perceived value. Speaking clearly and concisely signals confidence. Pausing before responding signals control. None of this requires arrogance. It requires awareness. One of the most underestimated elements of language is pacing. Speaking too quickly can signal nervousness or eagerness to please. Speaking too slowly can signal confidence or dominance depending on tone. Strategic pauses create emphasis and allow ideas to land. Silence after a key statement often increases its impact. People fill silence with interpretation, often amplifying what was just said. Questions are another form of control. The questions you ask direct attention. They shape what people think about and how they think about it. A well-placed question can reframe an entire conversation without confrontation. Instead of arguing a point, you guide the other person to examine their own assumptions. This feels less threatening and often more persuasive. Psychological triggers operate through language constantly. Scarcity, urgency, authority, social proof, and consistency are not marketing tricks. They are cognitive shortcuts the brain uses to make decisions efficiently. When someone says this opportunity won't be available for long, attention increases. When someone says experts agree, resistance often decreases. Awareness of these triggers allows you to recognize when they are being used on you and decide consciously how to respond. Ethical mastery means using these triggers responsibly. The goal is not to deceive, but to communicate in a way that aligns with how the human mind actually works. Ignoring these dynamics does not make communication purer. It makes it less effective. Integrity lies in intention, not in ignorance of influence. Labels are another powerful linguistic tool. When you label behavior or identity, people unconsciously move to confirm or reject it. Calling someone thoughtful invites thoughtful behavior. Calling someone difficult invites defensiveness. Labels shape self-perception in real time. Skilled communicators use labels carefully, knowing they can guide behavior without force. Reframing is the art of changing meaning without changing facts. When someone presents a problem, reframing it as a challenge shifts emotional tone. When someone presents criticism, reframing it as feedback reduces threat. Reframing does not deny reality. It changes how reality is interpreted. This skill alone can de-escalate conflict and restore cooperation. Metaphors also shape understanding. The mind thinks in images. When you describe a situation as a battle, people prepare for conflict. When you describe it as a process, people prepare for patience. Metaphors are not decorative. They are directive. They tell the mind how to organize experience. Another important aspect of language is emotional precision. Many conflicts persist because emotions are described vaguely. Saying I'm upset is less effective than saying I feel dismissed. Precision reduces misunderstanding. It directs attention to the actual issue rather than the emotional noise around it. Social intelligence values clarity over intensity. Listening is also part of language mastery. Most people listen to respond, not to understand. They wait for their turn to speak, rather than absorbing meaning. When you listen fully, you gain information others miss. You hear hesitation, emphasis, contradiction. You also make others feel heard, which lowers defensiveness and increases openness. Mirroring language patterns subtly builds rapport. Matching vocabulary, rhythm, and level of formality signals alignment. This should never be exaggerated or mechanical. When done naturally, it creates familiarity. Familiarity breeds trust. Trust opens doors to influence. Language also reveals internal state. Pay attention to absolutes like always and never. These often signal emotional reasoning rather than objective assessment. Pay attention to passive language, which may signal avoidance of responsibility. Pay attention to excessive justification, which may signal insecurity. Words reveal psychology if you know how to listen. Your own language also programs your internal state. The way you speak to yourself shapes confidence, resilience, and perception. Catastrophic language amplifies fear. Empowering language expands options. Social intelligence includes internal communication. You cannot speak powerfully outward if you speak destructively inward. Another layer of control is knowing when not to speak. Not every thought needs expression. Strategic restraint often communicates more than verbosity. When you speak less, your words carry more weight. People listen more closely. Silence creates contrast. Contrast creates impact. As you develop linguistic awareness, conversations begin to feel different. You notice when framing shifts. You hear emotional undercurrents. You sense when words are being used to control, soothe, provoke, or distract. This awareness slows interactions down internally, even when they move quickly externally. This skill is especially powerful in conflict. Instead of escalating emotionally, you can reframe, clarify, and redirect. Instead of reacting to provocation, you can change the frame entirely. Control does not come from overpowering others verbally. It comes from guiding the structure of the exchange. Language mastery also deepens authenticity. When you can express yourself clearly and calmly, you no longer rely on volume or intensity to be heard. You say less but mean more. Others feel this congruence and respond accordingly as this part closes. Remember this? Words shape perception, perception shapes emotion, and emotion shapes decisions. Master the language layer, and you gain influence without force. Not because you dominate others, because you understand the architecture of communication itself. This is the difference between speaking and leading, between talking and influencing. Language is not just what you say. It is how reality is shaped in the minds of others and in your own. Every social environment contains a hierarchy, whether it is acknowledged or denied. This hierarchy is not always formal, and it is rarely fixed, but it is always present. Humans are deeply sensitive to status because, throughout our evolutionary history, status determined access to resources, protection, influence, and survival. Modern society may appear more egalitarian on the surface. Yet the same psychological mechanisms continue to operate beneath awareness. shaping how people treat one another and how power flows through interactions. Status is not the same as dominance, and it is not limited to wealth, titles, or authority. Status is perceived value within a specific context. A person may hold high status in one environment and low status in another. A skilled professional may feel confident at work and insecure in a social setting. A charismatic individual may command attention in a group but defer in intimate relationships. Status is fluid, situational, and constantly renegotiated. Understanding status dynamics does not make you cynical. It makes you realistic. Many people struggle socially not because they lack intelligence or ability, but because they misread status cues or unknowingly signal lower status than they intend. Social intelligence begins when you see how these signals operate and learn to work with them consciously. The human brain continuously assesses relative status through subtle cues. Who speaks first? Who interrupts? Who apologizes? Who waits? Who sets the agenda? Who reacts emotionally? And who remains composed? These behaviors are not consciously analyzed, but they are felt. They create impressions that shape how much influence someone has before any argument is made. One of the most powerful status signals is emotional control. The person who is least reactive in an interaction often holds more power. This is because emotional reactivity signals dependence on outcome. If you need approval, agreement, or resolution more than the other person, you are already negotiating from a weaker position. Calmness communicates self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency communicates value. Another key status signal is scarcity. People who are overly available often signal lower value, even if unintentionally. People who are selective with their time, attention, and energy signal higher value. This does not mean being distant or unkind. It means having boundaries. Boundaries tell others that your time matters. When your time matters, you matter. Speech patterns also signal status. Speaking concisely signals confidence. Rambling signals uncertainty or a need to justify. Asking thoughtful questions signals curiosity and control. Answering everything immediately can signal eagerness to please. Pausing before responding signals deliberation. These patterns are subtle, but they accumulate quickly in perception. Deference is another important concept. Deference is not submission. It is acknowledgement of hierarchy. Humans expect appropriate deference in contexts where hierarchy is established. When deference is given where it is not earned, it lowers your perceived status. When deference is withheld where it is expected, it creates friction. Social intelligence involves calibrating deference appropriately. Status dynamics also operate through contribution. People who add value to a group gain status. This value can take many forms: competence, insight, humor, emotional stability, leadership, or problem solving. Complaining without contributing lowers status. Taking responsibility raises it. Being useful in moments of uncertainty is one of the fastest ways to increase perceived value. Another overlooked status signal is comfort with disagreement. People who can disagree calmly without hostility signal confidence in their position and identity. People who avoid disagreement entirely signal fear of rejection. People who become aggressive during disagreement signal insecurity. The ability to hold your ground without escalating emotionally is a hallmark of high social intelligence. Status is also communicated through body language. Upright posture, relaxed movements, and stillness signal confidence. Excessive movement can signal anxiety. Shrinking posture signals low perceived value. Overly expansive posture without congruence can signal compensation. The body tells the truth about how you see yourself. Eye contact deserves special attention. Balanced eye contact signals confidence and presence. Avoiding eye contact can signal discomfort or submission. Excessive staring can signal aggression. The ability to hold eye contact calmly without tension communicates emotional regulation and self-assurance. It says, "I am comfortable here." Interruptions are another clear status indicator. High-status individuals interrupt less, but are interrupted less as well. Low-status individuals are interrupted more frequently and often allow it. allowing constant interruption teaches others that your words are negotiable. Setting boundaries around speaking time calmly and without apology recalibrates status. One of the most misunderstood aspects of hierarchy is that it is often co-created. People signal how they expect to be treated, and others respond accordingly. This does not mean blame. It means agency. When you change your signals, the dynamic often shifts. Not instantly, but noticeably. Status dynamics are especially visible in group settings. Groups naturally look for leaders, stabilizers, and contributors. The person who speaks with clarity and calm often becomes a reference point. The person who reacts emotionally often becomes marginalized. The group responds not to intention, but to behavior. Social intelligence also involves knowing when to step into leadership and when to step back. Leadership is not about control. It is about responsibility. When situations become uncertain, people look for someone who can tolerate ambiguity and provide direction. If you can do this without ego, your status rises naturally. Another powerful status signal is how you respond to praise and criticism. Over-defensiveness lowers status. Excessive humility lowers status. Calm acknowledgement maintains it. When you can accept feedback without collapsing or attacking, you signal internal stability. Stability is attractive. Instability is costly. Status also transfers. People gain perceived value by association. Being respected by respected individuals increases your status. Being tolerated by high-status individuals does not. This is why social circles matter. Humans infer value based on relational networks, often unconsciously. Importantly, status is not a zero-sum game. Raising your own status does not require lowering others. In fact, helping others feel valued often increases your own standing. Secure individuals do not need to diminish others. Insecure individuals do. This difference is felt immediately. Status anxiety is one of the most common sources of social stress. People constantly compare themselves, often unconsciously, leading to envy, resentment, or overcompensation. Social intelligence reduces this anxiety by shifting focus from comparison to contribution. When you focus on adding value, status becomes a byproduct rather than an obsession. It is also important to recognize false status. Loudness, aggression, and dominance can mimic high status, but they are unstable. True status is supported by competence, consistency, and emotional regulation. False status collapses under pressure. True status holds. In professional environments, status often aligns with competence and results, but not always. Politics, perception, and communication style matter. Those who understand how to present their value clearly and calmly often advance faster than those who rely solely on hard work. This is not unfairness. It is psychology. In personal relationships, status, dynamics, shape, attraction, and respect. Over-accommodation erodes attraction. Healthy boundaries strengthen it. Emotional self-sufficiency creates polarity. Desperation collapses it. These dynamics operate regardless of conscious beliefs. Social intelligence allows you to navigate these dynamics without becoming obsessed with them. You see them, but you are not ruled by them. You adjust when needed, assert when appropriate, and disengage when necessary. This flexibility is itself a form of power. Another crucial skill is knowing when to exit low-value dynamics. Not every hierarchy is worth climbing. Some environments reward dysfunction. Choosing where to invest your energy is a status decision. High-status individuals choose environments that align with their values and strengths. As you develop awareness of social hierarchies, you may initially feel discomfort. Seeing these dynamics can make interactions feel more deliberate. Over time, however, awareness becomes natural. You stop overthinking and start sensing. The body recognizes patterns faster than the mind. Ultimately, status is not about superiority. It is about alignment. When your behavior, values, and self-perception align, others respond accordingly. You do not need to force respect. You embody it. As this chapter closes, remember this. Power in human interaction is rarely seized. It is granted in response to signals. When you understand how status is perceived and transferred, you gain the ability to shape those signals consciously. Not to dominate, but to stand firmly in your value. This is not about becoming someone else. It is about removing behaviors that hide who you already are. When that happens, influence follows naturally. The deeper you go into human psychology and social intelligence, the more clearly you begin to see a line that many people never consciously examine. It is the line between manipulation and mastery. On the surface, both may look similar. Both involve influence. Both involve understanding human behavior. But beneath the surface, they are driven by entirely different intentions, produce entirely different outcomes, and shape entirely different kinds of power. Manipulation is rooted in fear and deficiency. It arises from the belief that you must control others because you cannot trust outcomes, boundaries, or your own value. Mastery, on the other hand, is rooted in clarity and self-regulation. It arises from the ability to influence without needing, to dominate, to guide without needing to deceive, and to protect yourself without becoming closed or aggressive. Most people engage in manipulation unconsciously. They guilt, pressure, withhold affection, exaggerate urgency, or play victim not because they are malicious, but because they lack awareness. They are trying to regulate their own emotions by controlling someone else's behavior. This is the core of manipulation, outsourcing emotional regulation. When you understand this, manipulation becomes easier to recognize and far less effective against you. You stop reacting to surface tactics and start seeing the underlying need. Urgency often masks anxiety. Flattery often masks insecurity. Intimidation often masks fear of loss. Once you see the motive, the tactic loses much of its power. Mastery begins with internal sovereignty. If you can regulate your own emotional state, set boundaries without hostility, and tolerate discomfort without collapsing, you become extremely difficult to manipulate. Manipulation relies on triggering emotional reflexes: fear, guilt, obligation, urgency, validation, seeking. When those reflexes are no longer automatic, manipulation has nowhere to land. One of the most common manipulation tactics is emotional urgency. Someone pressures you to decide quickly, respond immediately, or commit before you have time to think. This bypasses reason and forces action from anxiety. Social mastery recognizes urgency as a signal, not a command. You slow down rather than speed up. Calm pacing restores control. Another common tactic is guilt. Guilt manipulation relies on your desire to be seen as good, kind, or fair. It frames compliance as moral obligation. Mastery allows you to separate responsibility from emotional pressure. You recognize that feeling bad does not automatically mean you are wrong. You respond to facts and values, not emotional coercion. Fear-based manipulation is equally common. Fear of loss, rejection, conflict, or disapproval drives many people into compliance. When fear is triggered, the mind narrows. Options disappear. Mastery expands perspective. You ask yourself, what is actually being threatened here? Often, the threat is symbolic rather than real. Flattery is another subtle form of control. Excessive praise can create obligation. When someone elevates you unnaturally, they may be positioning themselves to ask for something later. Mastery receives praise calmly without becoming dependent on it. You do not reject it, but you do not let it steer you. Victimhood is one of the most powerful manipulation strategies because it leverages empathy. When someone positions themselves as helpless or wronged, others feel compelled to rescue or accommodate. Mastery allows empathy without surrender. You can acknowledge suffering without assuming responsibility for fixing it. Another manipulative dynamic is intermittent reinforcement. This occurs when approval, affection, or validation is given inconsistently. The unpredictability keeps people emotionally invested, always trying to regain the positive response. Awareness breaks this pattern. When you stop chasing emotional rewards, the leverage collapses. Social intelligence also helps you recognize manipulation in groups. Group pressure, consensus illusion, and moral framing can push individuals into agreement they do not truly support. Mastery involves the courage to pause, question, or abstain. Silence can be a form of resistance. Non-participation is sometimes the strongest response. Importantly, mastery does not mean you never influence others. Influence is unavoidable in human interaction. Every action influences perception. The difference lies in transparency and alignment. Are you influencing to serve a mutually beneficial outcome, or to avoid discomfort and maintain control? Ethical influence respects autonomy, provides information, frames options clearly, and allows choice. Manipulation obscures options, distorts information, and pressures compliance. One builds trust over time. The other erodes it, even if it succeeds temporarily. Mastery also involves knowing your own manipulative tendencies. Everyone has them. When you feel insecure, threatened, or desperate, the temptation to control others increases. Self-awareness allows you to catch this impulse early. Instead of manipulating, you address the underlying need directly. This self-honesty is crucial. Without it, people justify manipulation as strategy, toughness, or realism. In truth, it often backfires long-term. Relationships weaken. Trust erodes. Influence becomes brittle. Mastery produces durable influence because it is grounded in respect. Protecting yourself also means recognizing when disengagement is the healthiest option. Not every interaction can be influenced constructively. Some people rely on manipulation as their primary mode of relating. Trying to outmaneuver them often drains energy. Calm boundaries and distance are often more effective than confrontation. Boundaries are a central tool of mastery. Clear boundaries reduce the need for manipulation on both sides. They communicate what is acceptable without hostility. Protect your time, energy, and values. People who lack boundaries are easily controlled. People with rigid boundaries are isolated. Mastery finds the middle ground. Another aspect of protection is emotional detachment without emotional numbness. You care, but you do not cling. You engage, but you do not chase. This balance makes you resilient, prevents others from using your emotions as leverage. Mastery also requires patience. Manipulation seeks immediate results. Mastery plays the long game. It understands that trust, respect, and influence compound over time. You may lose short-term advantages by refusing to manipulate, but you gain long-term authority. This is especially important in leadership, relationships, and negotiations. People may comply with manipulation once or twice, but they remember how it felt. They may not confront you, but they adjust their behavior quietly. Mastery creates alignment rather than compliance. Another critical distinction is intention during conflict. Manipulation seeks to win. Mastery seeks resolution or clarity. Winning at the cost of trust is rarely true victory. Mastery knows when to assert and when to yield, based on values rather than ego. As you integrate this level of awareness, you may notice that your tolerance for dysfunctional dynamics decreases. This is natural. Clarity changes standards. You no longer confuse intensity with depth or control with strength. You seek interactions that are grounded, reciprocal, and respectful. At the same time, mastery does not make you naive. You see manipulation clearly. You simply do not mirror it. You respond with calm, clarity, and boundaries. This response often disarms manipulators because it denies them emotional leverage. The ultimate form of protection is internal alignment. When your actions align with your values, you trust yourself. When you trust yourself, you are less susceptible to pressure. When you are less susceptible to pressure, influence becomes a choice rather than a defense mechanism. As this chapter closes, remember this: manipulation is power borrowed from fear. Mastery is power built from self-regulation and clarity. One is unstable and exhausting. The other is quiet and enduring. True social intelligence does not turn you into a controller of people. It turns you into a person who cannot be easily controlled. From that position, influence becomes natural, ethical, and effective. This is not about winning every interaction. It is about standing firmly in yourself, regardless of the interaction. That is mastery. Winning social interactions does not mean dominating others, outmaneuvering them, or bending every situation to your will. That kind of winning is short-lived and fragile. True winning is leaving interactions with clarity, influence, and self-respect intact. It is being heard without forcing, respected without demanding, and influential without manipulation. This form of success is not loud, but it is consistent. It compounds over time and reshapes how people respond to you across every area of life. At the core of winning interactions is authority, at the authority of title or position. Presence is what people feel when you enter a space. It is communicated before you speak, through posture, pace, eye contact, and emotional regulation. People instinctively assess whether you are grounded in yourself or seeking something from them. Authority flows toward those who appear internally complete rather than externally dependent. Authority begins with self-alignment. When your words, tone, and behavior align with your values, you become predictable in the best way. Others sense coherence. Incoherence, saying one thing while signaling another, creates uncertainty, and uncertainty weakens influence. Authority is not about being rigid. It is about being internally consistent. Attraction, whether social, emotional, or romantic, follows similar principles. Attraction is often misunderstood as charm, appearance, or performance. In reality, attraction arises from polarity. Polarity exists when two individuals are not chasing each other for validation, but are instead grounded in their own sense of worth. Neediness collapses attraction. Self-sufficiency strengthens it. People are drawn to those who do not rush them, who are comfortable with silence, and who do not overinvest prematurely. This does not mean being cold or distant. It means being present without attachment to outcome. When you are not trying to extract something from the interaction, others relax. Relaxation creates openness. Openness creates connection. Negotiation is another arena where social intelligence becomes decisive. Most negotiations fail not because of poor logic, but because of unmanaged emotion. Fear of loss, desire for approval, or anxiety about conflict push people into concessions they later regret. Winning negotiations require emotional discipline more than verbal skill. The strongest negotiators are not aggressive. They are calm. They listen more than they speak. They ask questions that reveal priorities rather than pushing positions. They understand that leverage comes from options. When you are willing to walk away, your position strengthens automatically. This willingness must be genuine, not theatrical. People sense false detachment. Negotiation is also about timing. Pushing too early creates resistance. Waiting too long can signal uncertainty. Social intelligence involves sensing when the other party is emotionally ready to move. Emotional readiness often matters more than logical readiness. When someone feels heard and respected, they become more flexible. Respect is the common thread that runs through authority, attraction, and negotiation. Respect is not demanded. It is evoked. People respect those who respect themselves. This self-respect shows up in boundaries, in how you speak about yourself, and in what you tolerate. When you consistently tolerate disrespect, you teach others how to treat you. Boundaries are not walls. They are filters. They clarify what behavior is acceptable and what is not. Setting boundaries calmly and early prevents escalation later. Emotional reactions often arise when boundaries are unclear. When boundaries are clear, interactions become simpler. Another aspect of winning interactions is adaptability. Social contexts change constantly. The behavior that works in one setting may fail in another. Social intelligence allows you to adjust without losing authenticity. You are not changing who you are. You are changing how you express it based on context. This adaptability requires awareness of group dynamics. Groups behave differently than individuals. In groups, people are more status conscious and less emotionally expressive. Winning group interactions often means speaking less, but with more precision. You wait for the right moment, then contribute something that adds clarity or direction. This elevates perceived value. In group settings, emotional regulation becomes even more important. Emotional outbursts lower status quickly. Calm responses raise it. When tension arises, the person who stabilizes the group gains influence, even if they say very little. Stability is leadership in its simplest form. Another key element is assertiveness. Assertiveness is often confused with aggression. Aggression pushes. Assertiveness stands. Aggression seeks to overpower. Assertiveness seeks clarity. When you state your needs calmly and directly, without apology or hostility, you create respect. People may not always agree, but they understand where you stand. Passive behavior erodes respect over time. People may like you, but they will not defer to you. Aggressive behavior creates compliance mixed with resentment. Assertive behavior creates clarity and mutual respect. This balance is a cornerstone of social mastery. Listening deeply is another underestimated way to win. When you listen without interrupting, defending or redirecting the conversation toward yourself, people feel valued. Feeling valued lowers defenses. Lower defenses increase openness. Openness creates influence. Many people talk themselves out of influence by speaking too much. Silence used intentionally is also powerful. Silence after someone speaks signals consideration. Silence after a key point allows it to land. Silence in response to provocation denies escalation. Those who are comfortable with silence control the pace of interaction. Winning interactions also involves choosing battles wisely. Not every disagreement requires resolution. Not every provocation deserves response. Strategic restraint preserves energy and status. Engaging in every conflict signals insecurity. Selectivity signals confidence. Another important factor is emotional generosity. This does not mean overgiving or self-sacrifice. It means being willing to acknowledge others' contributions, emotions, and perspectives without diminishing yourself. Generosity from a position of strength increases respect. Generosity from a position of need decreases it. Social intelligence also requires realism. Some people will not respond positively, no matter how skillful you are. Their reactions are shaped by their own insecurities, traumas, and limitations. Winning does not mean converting everyone. It means knowing when to disengage without resentment. Disengagement is a form of power. Walking away from disrespect, manipulation, or chaos preserves self-respect. People often mistake endurance for strength. In reality, endurance without boundaries is self-abandonment. Strength is choosing environments and relationships that align with your values. Another dimension of winning interactions is consistency. Inconsistent behavior confuses people and weakens trust. When your responses vary dramatically based on mood or audience, others cannot predict you. Predictability, when aligned with integrity, builds credibility. People know where they stand with you. Attraction and respect both deepen when people feel emotionally safe around you. Emotional safety does not mean comfort at all times. It means knowing that disagreement will not lead to humiliation, volatility, or withdrawal. Creating this safety makes you someone others want to engage with repeatedly. Winning interactions also involve repairing missteps. No one is perfect. Miscommunication happens. Emotional reactions happen. The ability to acknowledge, correct, and move forward without excessive self-justification strengthens respect. Repair is more important than perfection. Social intelligence sharpens over time through observation. You begin to notice which behaviors create ease and which create friction. You see patterns in responses. You adjust, not through overthinking, but through embodied learning. Eventually, winning interactions feels natural rather than strategic at its highest level. Winning social interactions is not about tactics. It is about embodiment. You embody calm, clarity, boundaries, and respect. People respond to what you are more than to what you do. This embodiment cannot be faked consistently. It is the result of internal work. As you integrate these principles, interactions begin to shift subtly. People listen more closely. They check in with you. They respond rather than react. Opportunities arise not because you chase them, but because others perceive you as stable, capable, and trustworthy. This is the quiet advantage of social intelligence. It does not announce itself. It accumulates. It changes trajectories. Authority, attraction, negotiation, and respect are no longer separate skills. They become expressions of the same internal foundation. As this chapter closes, remember this: winning social interactions is not about controlling others. It is about mastering yourself so thoroughly that interactions resolve in your favor naturally. When your presence is grounded, your communication clear, and your boundaries firm, winning becomes less about effort and more about alignment. That is the kind of success that lasts. Psychological mastery is not the ability to dominate conversations, predict every move, or bend people to your will. Those are surface-level ambitions that fade quickly. True mastery is deeper and quieter. It is the state of being so grounded in yourself that external pressures lose their power over you. It is the ability to remain steady when others are reactive, clear when others are confused, and intentional when others are driven by impulse. At this level, control is no longer something you seek. It is something you embody. Becoming unshakable begins with internal stability. Internal stability does not mean the absence of emotion. It means emotions move through you without hijacking your behavior. You feel fear without panicking. You feel anger without lashing out. You feel desire without becoming dependent on outcome. This emotional sovereignty is the foundation of all psychological control. Without it, influence collapses under pressure. Many people believe strength comes from certainty. In reality, strength comes from tolerance. Tolerance for uncertainty. Tolerance for discomfort. Tolerance for not being liked, not being understood, not being validated immediately. When you can tolerate these states without rushing to escape them, you gain freedom. And freedom is power. Being unreadable does not mean being cold or deceptive. It means your internal state is not easily accessed or manipulated by others. People cannot provoke predictable reactions from you. They cannot push emotional buttons and control your behavior. This does not make you distant. It makes you selective. You choose when to reveal and when to withhold based on intention rather than impulse. Predictability is a double-edged sword. Consistency builds trust, but emotional predictability invites manipulation. When others know exactly how to trigger you, they gain leverage. Psychological mastery involves consistency of values, not consistency of emotional reactions. Your principles are stable. Your responses are flexible. One of the key markers of mastery is response over reaction. Reaction is automatic and emotionally driven. Response is deliberate and chosen. The space between stimulus and response is where mastery lives. Expanding that space gives you options. Options give you control. The space is created through awareness. Awareness of bodily signals. Awareness of emotional shifts. Awareness of thought patterns. When you notice what is happening inside you in real time, you are no longer swept away by it. You are standing beside it, observing. This observer position is powerful. It turns experience into information. Psychological mastery also involves detachment from outcome. Outcome attachment is one of the primary sources of anxiety and manipulation of vulnerability. When you need a specific result, approval, agreement, success, you become emotionally invested. That investment can be exploited. Detachment does not mean indifference. It means you care, but you are not enslaved by the result. When you are detached from outcome, your behavior changes. You speak more honestly. You negotiate more calmly. You walk away more easily when alignment is not present. This detachment is felt by others as confidence. Confidence rooted in self-trust rather than bravado. Another critical aspect of mastery is internal alignment. When your actions align with your values, you experience less internal conflict. Less internal conflict means less emotional leakage. Less emotional leakage means greater clarity. People sense alignment immediately. It makes your presence feel solid. Internal alignment also eliminates the need for excessive control. When you trust yourself, you do not need to micromanage others or manipulate situations. You respond to reality as it is, rather than trying to force it to conform to your fears. This adaptability is often mistaken for passivity, but it is actually strength. Psychological mastery also includes knowing when to engage and when to disengage. Not every situation deserves your energy. Not every challenge is worth meeting. Selectivity is a form of control. Where you invest attention determines what grows in your life. High-level mastery involves curating your environment as carefully as you curate your responses. Being in control does not mean controlling people. It means controlling access to you. Your time, energy, attention, and emotional investment are valuable. When you distribute them indiscriminately, you weaken your position. When you allocate them intentionally, you strengthen it. Another hallmark of mastery is comfort with silence. Silence reveals insecurity in those who need to fill it. It reveals confidence in those who can hold it. When you are comfortable with silence, you slow interactions down. You force clarity. You allow others to show their hand. Silence becomes a mirror. Mastery also involves relinquishing the need to be understood by everyone. The desire to be understood is often a disguised desire for validation. When you release it, you speak more cleanly. You explain less. You trust that the right people will understand, and the rest do not need to. This does not mean becoming dismissive or arrogant. It means recognizing that clarity does not require consensus. You can be respectful without being persuasive. You can be firm without being aggressive. You can be present without being absorbed. Another layer of psychological mastery is resilience. Resilience is not toughness for its own sake. It is the ability to recover quickly without carrying emotional residue forward unnecessarily. Resilient people feel fully, then move on. They do not suppress, but they also do not ruminate endlessly. They extract the lesson and release the rest. Resilience is built through perspective. When you see experiences as data rather than verdicts, setbacks lose their sting. Feedback becomes information. Failure becomes instruction. Conflict becomes calibration. This mindset keeps you adaptive rather than defensive. Being unshakable also requires humility. Arrogance is brittle. It cracks under pressure. Humility allows learning. Learning allows adaptation. Adaptation sustains power. The most masterful individuals are often the most curious. They observe more than they declare. Psychological mastery does not eliminate emotion. It integrates it. Emotion becomes a signal rather than a command. Intuition becomes informed rather than impulsive. Logic becomes flexible rather than rigid. These elements work together rather than competing. At this level, influence becomes natural. You are not trying to influence. You simply are who you are, clearly and consistently. Others adjust. Some are drawn in. Some fall away. Both outcomes are appropriate. Mastery includes acceptance of this filtering effect. Control also extends inward to self-talk. The way you interpret events internally shapes your emotional state. Mastery involves speaking to yourself with clarity rather than cruelty. You correct yourself without shaming. You motivate without fear. This internal relationship sets the tone for all external ones. Another important component is patience. Psychological mastery is not reactive. It waits. It observes. It allows situations to unfold before intervening. This patience is often mistaken for hesitation. In truth, it is timing. Acting at the right moment requires restraint beforehand. At the highest level, mastery looks ordinary from the outside. There is no performance, no theatrics, just steadiness. People trust you not because you impress them, but because you are consistent. You are not easily swayed. You are not easily rattled. You are not easily controlled. This steadiness creates a gravitational pull. Others feel safer, clearer, and more grounded around you. They defer without feeling diminished. They listen without feeling coerced. This is influence at its most refined. As this audiobook concludes, understand this: mastery is not an endpoint. It is a way of operating. You will still feel emotion. You will still face pressure. You will still encounter manipulation, conflict, and uncertainty. The difference is that these forces no longer own you. You move through the world with awareness rather than autopilot, choice rather than compulsion, and clarity rather than confusion. You see the game, but you are no longer trapped inside it. You participate consciously, on your terms. That is what it means to master human psychology and social intelligence. Not to control others, but to be fully in control of yourself. From that position, influence is no longer something you chase. It is something that naturally follows.